Welcome to Common Voices. We are a podcast focused on bringing together individuals of all backgrounds and focusing on allyship, on unity, and on coexistence. I am your host, Daniel Corin. And here with me today is the one and only Yuval David, an Emmy Award-winning journalist, filmmaker, and actor, as well as a prominent advocate for Jewish and LGBT rights. Yuval serves as a strategic advisor to international NGOs, to policy institutes, and advocacy orgs. He brings expertise in media and socio-political analysis, and his commentary has appeared everywhere. He's a frequent speaker at conferences, academic institutions, and policy forums. And through his work, Yuval has advanced human rights and combating anti-Semitism and hatred. Yuval, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me on your show. Thank you for everything that you're doing. It's important to empower other people to be activists and advocates like we are, and hopefully to be better at it than we are. That's the only way that our Jewish people will survive, is if Jews and allies rise up and become the advocates that they're meant to be.
Amen, amen. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think, again, from watching so much of your content, I think you and I are very much on the same page that we need, kind of a common sense movement, a movement where Jews, allies, we're all people, I think, who are against radicalism, who are against hatred, can come together. And it's something that's really shown, So you obviously, here's my first question. You obviously do a lot. You're an actor, you're a director, a news commentator, a media personality, a content creator, a filmmaker. When do you sleep?
That's been a problem. Honestly, it's been a problem. My sleep has most definitely suffered over these last couple years, definitely since October 7th of 23, and that's not healthy. So we know that we're facing a collective trauma, that the Jewish people are not facing PTSD because there hasn't been a post yet. We're the only people who have a war happening within another war happening. And it's a CTSD, it's a current traumatic stress disorder. And my sleep has suffered because I'm nonstop as a Jewish advocate and activist, advising 43 governmental and non-governmental organizations on the news multiple times a week as a commentator, writing 2 to 6 articles a week, meeting with political leaders and organizational leaders and community leaders, and meetings with victims of terror, and leading workshops and sessions for those trying to overcome trauma with focusing not on being a victim, but focusing on being a determined, resilient survivor. And all of my other work, it is exhausting. And I've been feeling that. So I acknowledge that within this collective trauma that we're all facing as a Jewish people, any Jew who's engaged within our Jewishness is feeling the collective trauma of an increase in stress, depression, anxiety. That has ramifications on life. So I'm working on it, on being more cognizant of what my mind, body, and soul needs in order to recover so I can be the best advocate, activist, warrior, family member, friend, everything as possible. So it's a work in progress.
Good luck. Has there been particular attention or particular emphasis on, because you just described kind of 10 different roles that you have. Um, how have you been able to kind of straddle all of these things at the same time? Because at first I would have thought that there's been more of a focus on your media and news commentating and activism, but when I look at your website, I look at some of the other stuff, I see you're still very active in the filmmaking and, in television and acting side of things as well. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I've always advocacy and activism has always been part of my life. I understood that that was just something that every Jew needs to do, every American needs to do, every Israeli needs to do, every citizen of a democratic country needs to do, and that's was my understanding. Over the years, my career in entertainment and media uh, kept bringing in or having opportunities for me to insert the advocacy and activism into my work in entertainment and media as a journalist, as an actor, as a filmmaker. And ultimately, the advocacy side became part of my career when I would get hired as a consultant, as an advisor to different organizations, helping them craft their messaging, helping them focus on the storytelling aspect of what the organization is, how they can reach their target demographic, how they can expand their initiatives, increase awareness. Uh, and then that led to my doing the same thing with different politicians and community leaders. So I think the overreaching theme of my multi-hyphenate career path is that I'm a storyteller with impact.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer. To speak to your activism and to speak to your advocacy, which you've mentioned a few times, I feel everyone in this space has been quite active recently, but there's been so much, I guess, to comment on. One of the comments you recently made was about San Diego Pride to cancel the performance of Kalani. I know she was canceled in New York and from other concerts. I know she's made horrific statements about supporting the Intifada. Have you received any official response? Has there been any movement there?
Official responses, uh, I can't discuss yet. Unofficial responses, tremendous amounts of hate messages from people who think that it's very wrong of me to try to convince San Diego Pride to cancel her show. Um, and I think that that's unfortunate. The anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish racism, anti-Jewish hatred, anti-Jewish bigotry has all become so normalized within our society. And yet, if that same hatred and bigotry was targeting almost any other group in this country, it would be condemned. But the normalization of anti-Jewish hatred and bigotry is mind-twistingly disconcerting, and it's just getting worse. And that's exactly what her participation in San Diego Pride represents. She's somebody who's openly condemned Zionism, Israel, Jewish activists, and calls for intifada. Intifada, no matter how you try to twist it, intifada, when you look at the Islamist groups that talk about intifada,
Mhm.
is a word that means to shake things up. It specifically relates to a violent, terrorizing revolt and attacks against infidels, infidels being Jews, Israel, non-practicing Muslims, Christians, anybody who tries to control the Islamist cause, they can do an intifada against them. So for somebody to call out intifada is absolutely ridiculous. For LGBT people to support intifada is beyond insane because LGBT people are condemned to death according to Sharia law and according to the people who are calling out for intifada. So we're seeing useful idiots in the West who are far left-leaning, socialist, um, progressive, woke, elements of these different communities that are supporting the movements that are against us, that are against progressivism, that are against wokeism, that are
Yeah.
against LGBT people, that are against democracy,
Yeah.
against freedom of religion, against women's rights. It doesn't make any sense, but they've been manipulated.
It's truly mind-boggling, and I'd like to speak further to that. Here in Toronto, actually, there was a Pride parade recently, and there was a Jewish delegation, and obviously, it was accompanied by a significant security detail, much more so than any other group that was present. Now, some in the community have said that that wasn't safe and we shouldn't have had a delegation there, where I would very much disagree with that. But you, as a proud advocate for Jewish rights, as a member of the LGBT community, what is your stance on Jewish and
Show
Israeli
up.
representation?
Nobody's, I show up. Nobody's going to closet my LGBT identity. Nobody's going to closet my Jewish identity. Nobody's going to closet my Zionist identity. And nobody's going to closet my passionate fight for the values that are truly inclusive, that are truly accepting of all people. I do believe that everybody has a seat at the table. I am a free speech activist. But if you want a seat at the table and you want to kill somebody else at the table or erase somebody else at the table, then I do not believe that you have a seat at the table. I do believe in free speech, but there are limitations to free speech. If you're calling for death to Jews, if you're calling death to the IDF, if you're calling for death to Zionists, well, you know what? That no longer should be free speech. If you're calling for violent attacks against people and that those violent calling words are accompanied by violent actions, well, that no longer should be protected. Democracy has limitations, and those who are trying to take down democracy should also be condemned. The Palestinianist protests that we're seeing all around the country are not pro-Palestinian. They're not doing anything to help Palestinian people. They're not
Absolutely.
building infrastructure. They're not creating school systems. They're not supporting people of all faiths and religions to live in Palestinian territories. On the contrary, all the pro-Palestinian movement is an anti-Israel movement, is an anti-anybody who's not Islamist movement. It's a Palestinianist movement that's the Trojan horse of the Islamist movement that has manipulated so many people to do things that are against their own values. So, regarding pride, I've been an LGBT activist for my entire adult life, even when I was a teenager, and I know what the movement is supposed to be about. And I call out the hypocrisy within the movement. So, I marched in New York City Pride, in Washington, D.C. Pride, and other Pride events across the country. I will show up. And what I found this Pride season is I was the only person, at least who we saw during the Washington, D.C. and the World Pride, who had a pride flag with a Magen David on it. We didn't see anybody else other than me. We didn't see anybody else with a giant Magen David on their chest on a shirt other than me. I found that so disappointing. Jews are afraid to show up because we're being targeted, we're being attacked, we're receiving messages warning us of threats from the FBI, from ADL, from Stand With Us, from AJC, from APAC. All of these different organizations are alerting us to be afraid of these warnings and of the threats that are obvious, and Jews are afraid to show up. Well, I'm showing up anyway because it's important to march on and it's important to make sure that Jews are represented in the spaces in which we deserve representation, just like everybody else.
Preach, preach, preach. What was your experience like at those parades when you were the only one wearing a giant Magen David?
Many people came, I'm going to start with the positive. Many people
Please.
came up and said, "Wow, it's so great to see you here." Some people who actually know me and some people who just saw me and don't, know who I am or what I do, but saw the emblems that I was wearing and were very thankful and appreciative and said, "Thank you so much for showing up and for being here, for doing what you're doing, for having these flags, for waving the shirt, for wearing the shirt, whatever it is."
Yeah.
And I said to them, "Don't thank me, join me. Like, do this as well." And people were saying, but they're afraid. They're so afraid. And there are people within the LGBTQ space who are afraid of losing their community. They're afraid of losing their friends. So they're quieting their Jewishness. They're quieting their Zionism. They're quieting their other socio-political values in order to fit in with the greater LGBT community. I
Yeah.
think that's a problem. The LGBT community, it was always about diversity. We're the most diverse community in the world because we're part of every other community in the world. So if we're preaching tolerance, acceptance, diversity, we should allow for diversity of all people, but we are seeing an erasure of Jewish people from LGBTQ spaces. And that is also because there are Jewish people who are allowing for that to happen. And allies, especially the allies who are allowing that for that to happen, who aren't speaking up, who aren't taking action to ensure the representation and the safety of Jewish people. So first, I would witness that people saying, "Thank you so much. Wow, Yuval, you're so great. I follow you on social media. I see your article. I read your articles. I see you on the news, blah, 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 blah. Wonderful, wonderful." In contrast, there were people who were wearing keffiyehs all around the Pride events. People were chanting, "Jews ruined Pride. Jews
I saw
ruined
that.
cried. Zionists go home. Zionists get out. Um, Zionists are not welcome here. Uh, People yelled out that I'm a shame to the Jewish people, that we had things thrown at us. We had people being physically intimidating. And last year, my group was actually physically assaulted. We were jumped and physically attacked in the middle of the Pride March. And you know what? We were filming as it happened. So we had all of that footage of the people rushing directly towards the camera. And we had those photos, and I went very public with it. I shared it far and wide, and there are consequences. I do believe not in cancel culture, but I believe in consequence culture and counsel culture. I will counsel you to teach you about what is right and what is wrong when it comes to bigotry and hatred, especially when it deals with the Jewish people. And if you engage in hatred and bigotry and violent threats, well, you know what? There are consequences, and I will do my best to make sure that you will suffer those consequences.
So I really appreciate that. How would you say then your career as a counselor has gone? You've obviously been very active then in educating members of the LGBTQ community about Israel, and when anti-Israel activism is simply anti-Jewish hatred in disguise. Have you found any success? Have you been successful? Are there any stories you can share?
There are both stories and stories. There are successes. The fact that I've been able to be invited to events as a speaker, as a panelist, as a workshop leader in spaces where many Jews felt uncomfortable or many Jews were excluded, that already is a success. Now, that's a success that I saw and thought was a success for decades, especially when other Jews and Jewish organizations were truly excluded from these specific progressive and LGBTQ spaces, organizations, conferences. But I was there and I thought, okay, wow, this is a success. Maybe I'll be able to do something and create some change. But then ultimately on October 7th, and specifically on and after October 8th of 2023, I felt like all of those successes were all for naught because all of the work that I did, it felt like people just dove deeper into the pool or the sea of hatred and doubled down. So that was very disappointing. And it made me think, wow, did I just waste years of advocacy
Yeah.
engagement? Maybe. But it made me a better advocate. It made me a better activist. Now, in this new era of that we're experiencing of Islamic uh, terror spreading and the supporters of Islamic terror marching in major cities, like what you experience in Toronto, is one of the worst cities in North America of what you're experiencing there. Um,
Yeah.
the successes are in that more Jews and allies have been rising up and recognizing that they too are needed, that they too are leaders, and that none of us should stay silent or hide our head in the sand or cower in the darkness. The era of the Jew trembling in the corner in the shadows must be over. We cannot do that. We know what happens when we've done that in the past, and now we need to be bold, strong, informed, and educated Jews. So the success that I'm seeing is when people mention to me that they're inspired and motivated by what I'm doing, and they're doing it as well. That's success.
Listen, I think that's amazing. You're an effective communicator, you're a storyteller, and that's really, I think, what's the most compelling mission, for any of us, to be active storytellers in that way. As someone who's raised money, as someone who's been in communications, as someone who's been in advocacy, stories, I think, are much more compelling or much more intriguing than numbers, right? And I think when you're able to,
Yeah, absolutely. And to be able to quote the numbers is very important. To have the facts is very important, when we're speaking about whatever topic, but to shape it in a story is able to touch the hearts of whoever you're dealing with. I meet with policymakers regularly. I meet with politicians in the United States and Canada, in Israel, and oftentimes internationally, making sure that they're doing the right thing for the Jewish people and focusing on the values, especially if they're not Jewish. or if they're, Jewish light, like they're just Jewish by name only, to make sure that they're focusing on the values that are important to them, which then guide them to do the right thing for the Jewish people. And that also comes in through storytelling. But the facts, the figures are important. Our allies are almost more important than our Jewish people. Our Jewish people's survival has always depended on the allies rising up, whether it's the Hindu community, the Christian community, non-Jewish communities, different political movements, whatever it is. There are 15.3 million Jews in the world. Some people say there are 15.7 million Jews in the world. So it depends on the statistics. There are 7 million 39,000 Jews in Israel. There are just over 6 million Jews in the United States. There are 442,000 Jews in France. There are 394,000 Jews in Canada. There are 292,000 Jews in the UK. There are 173,000 Jews in Argentina, 145,000 Jews in Russia, 118,200 Jews in Australia. Like we can go through all of those numbers of how many Jews there are around the world, but ultimately we're 15.3 to 15.7 million people in the world. There are 2.4 billion Christians in the world. There are 2.2 billion Muslims in the world. There are 1.3 billion Hindus in the world. There are 585 million Buddhists in the world. The numbers are against us. If our allies don't rise up based on their values to understand why they should be allies, friends, supporters, partners of the Jewish people, then we're going to fail. And right now, we're in a war in which we're very much failing. I'm short-term pessimistic, but I'm long-term optimistic. If we weren't optimistic, we wouldn't say Am Yisrael Chai. We would just give up. Well, you know what? We're not giving up. We're fighting because we believe in a better future.
I couldn't agree with you more. Truly, and we are not giving up. I can't tell you how many people said that in Canada it's time to leave, it's time to make aliyah. I strongly disagree with that. It's time to double down. It's time to fight. It's time to be more active than ever. And obviously, I agree when it comes to allyship, when it comes to even having conversations with people, that can be the change, right? Simply by introducing Judaism to somebody who had never met a Jew before can be that radical change. I can't tell you how many people I've met, and when I tell them that I'm Jewish and that their understanding of Jewish was either Larry David or Woody Allen, right? And they didn't recognize that Jews like me even existed, or that the stories that I have or that my family has. Going back to your earlier point, I also really agree with the notion of effective messaging as part of storytelling. And just because this was one question I really wanted to ask you that I didn't have the chance to yet, 'cause we were talking about some of the issues within the LGBTQ community and some of those organized groups and organized movements. And recently I've seen a couple of videos that have gone viral of members, of radical members of some of these groups, answering, I guess, like the question that we always ask, which is, how can you, support Hamas? How can you support the actions of October 7th when, you would be thrown off a rooftop if you lived in Gaza? And I've seen a couple of these videos where they say, oh, well, we know that Hamas would kill us, but it's still our responsibility anyway to advocate for the rights of Palestinians, to advocate for the oppressed. What in your view is the best response to that?
The LGBT people who fight for or have advocated for the understanding of a non-binary existence have completely focused on a binary way of thinking, oppressor versus oppressed, good versus bad, black, white,
Mhm.
uh, victim, oppressor. These life doesn't neatly fit into binary thinking. That's what the LGBTQ movement focused on in terms of non-binary existence and non-binary lifestyle and non-binary uh, self-understanding.
Right.
So why are they forcing a binary way of thinking into a situation that is not binary? This is not a two sides issue. This is not an Israel versus Palestinians. It's not a Jew versus Muslims situation. It's a Islamist terror versus democracy situation. That's what this war is about. But they're trying to twist things in ways that they shouldn't be twisted. So I try to untwist those minds through the advocacy. What we're also seeing is LGBT people in the West are shoehorning Western issues into Middle Eastern situations in which those Western issues don't fit. They talk about racism. Race has nothing to do with anything that's going on in the Middle East. If anything, we're all the same racial group in the Middle East. I mean, it's like racism has nothing to do with it. It's about Israel trying to maintain its existence. It's about Jews trying to maintain our existence as we're battling with people who want to kill us.
Yep.
That's what this is about. If if the Muslim terrorists, the Islamist terrorists, decide to stop fighting, we have nothing to fight. We don't need to defend ourselves anymore. If they continue to fight, we need to continue to fight. And that's what's going on. Now Israel is stronger than it's been ever. And we're able to not fight back, but to fight forward because we believe in a future that we can create change that is safe, not just for Israelis of all faiths, but the entire Middle East and the world. That's what this is about. So for the LGBT people who say that they support resistance by any means necessary, um, it doesn't make sense when they condemn when an LGBT person, an LGBT Muslim is killed, but they don't condemn when an LGBT Israeli person is killed. And then they also ignore the fact that homosexuality is completely condemned within the Palestinian territories and within any country that practices Sharia law. I mean, for so long, I've collaborated with the Rainbow Railroad, Dignity, Freedom House, the White House, the State Department, LGBTQ organizations around the world to help rescue LGBT people and women out of dangerous and life-threatening situations internationally. The vast majority of those countries from which we tried to help people escape and achieve being able to just live
Yeah.
were from countries that practice Sharia law. So when these LGBT people say that they know that the Islamist movements and organizations would kill them because they're LGBT, but they still think it's important for them to fight for them, I, I really I don't understand that other than seeing that the manipulation, the propaganda, and the misinformation and disinformation that has gone on for so long has worked. And now they think that Jews are evil, that Israel is evil, and that the Palestinians are all innocent and they can do no wrong. Well, you know what? The Palestinian terrorists do a lot of wrong. Palestinian Islamic Jihad is frightening, is horrible, and should be condemned and should be eradicated, as should Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Muslim Brotherhood, and all of these other Islamist groups. That's it.
Absolutely, Yuval. Absolutely. Do you think that this refusal to accept other opinions, within now the new Pride movement, is this simply against Zionists? Is this simply against Jews? Or would you say, that it's more than that? For example, I know now many LGBTQ members who are also Christian, or I know many who are also conservative, and I've even seen like a couple of videos. There's this Italian comedian, I don't know if you know her, Ariel something, who's been very vocal about this, about kind of getting away from like the more radical part of this, and just saying how, hey, like this is kind of crazy. Do you think that those members of the LGBTQ community are also feeling ostracized right now?
Absolutely. The LGBTQIA plus movement started to add too many letters and to lose focus on what the movement originally started as. And I'm witnessing more and more LGBT people who are separating themselves from the QIA plus. I'm even seeing L, G, and B people who are separating themselves from the rest of the
I've
letters.
seen that too.
Um, you know, we need to be able to be right wing and left wing, conservative, traditional, liberal, and or progressive.
Absolutely.
But the LGBT movement has been co-opted by the progressive movement and has become something that it really doesn't need to be. So we're seeing many LGBT people who are leaving the movement, who are feeling increasingly uncomfortable within the LGBT movement movement because it's not an LGBT community anymore. It's a movement. It's become a political movement. Now, the LGBT movement is one of the most successful civil rights, social justice, human rights movements of our time, where they've achieved or we, I mean, I've been part of it. We've achieved incredible successes in terms of changing society. And now the movement reached these successes, and organizational leaders started to say, well, wait a second, what are we going to focus on now? We have all these donation dollars. We need to make sure we're going to continue to get donation dollars, that the organization can still stay afloat, that we can still get our salaries. What are we going to do? We need to find new initiatives that might work within this movement, and they're finding partnerships with different organizations that want to partner with them. What the Islamist movements are doing is exactly what they've done in the past. They partner with progressives, with socialists, with radicals, because those are the unstable people who they can manipulate to ultimately help their cause. The Muslim Brotherhood understood that not everybody's going to respond to violent terrorism, but if you can use triggering words and speak about things in the theoretical, then they might all of a sudden believe in what you're saying. For years, I saw the chants, uh, queer rights are Palestinian rights and Palestinian rights are queer rights. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, what does that mean? Or LGBT people chanting, we are all Palestinian.
Yeah.
They don't even know what they're talking about. Most of those people aren't Muslim, aren't Jewish, aren't Arab, and have never been to the Middle East. And yet they're adopting, this plight of a people that they really don't know anything about.
Very well said. Last question for you. I've seen a bunch of your news clips and a bunch of your speeches actually recently, and I've heard that you've mentioned, you've been a progressive advocate your whole life. There was a speech, I think it was at NYC Pride, where you mentioned how like some of what you've been saying now, the goalpost has shifted, and something that resonated with me that you said I thought was funny. You said you had another coming out party, but this time as a moderate centrist. I appreciated that because I always call myself a radical centrist, but but anything that brings us back to the center and being able to have conversations with each other, would be just fine for me. Do you think there is a growing movement of moderate centrists or of centrists more broadly in Canada, United States, as a result of the growing extremism on both the left and the right?
Absolutely. People are waking up, recognizing that we cannot only have the microphones and the spotlights on the extreme right and the extreme left, that the extremists are the loudest and most vocal, but many people are starting to recognize basic media training. If somebody is yelling into a microphone, if somebody's yelling and screaming all the time, they shouldn't be trusted. Somebody can normally, then and calmly and actually engage in a conversation and be
Right.
interested and respectful of the other people in the conversation, then maybe those are the people that you should trust, or at least trust more than the screaming and yelling people. So we're seeing more people moving or finding themselves within the moderate and centrist elements of the socio-political spectrum. And that is a growing trend because the far right we've known has been crazy for a long time. The far left is proving that they're crazy for a long time. And it's not a linear thing between the right and the left. It's a circle where the far right and the far left are meeting at the same exact spot. There
Yes.
are only slight things that differentiate the far right from the far left.
Yes.
And yeah, the goalposts shifted, and I found myself no longer being within the progressive movement, no longer even being a Democrat in the United States, which was very weird for me because that was such a major part of my
Yeah.
identity.
Yeah.
I'm still liberal. I still believe in progressivism, in
Sure.
progress, but I'm just not part of the progressive movement. So my values haven't changed. The goalposts shifted, and all of a sudden I was like, wait, where did my community go? Oh, they're over there. And I understood that I don't need to chase after them. I need to understand why they shifted, why things are different, and where my place is in things. So I've lost a lot of friends. I've lost the majority of my friends in North America because they now think that that they think terrible things about me, and I'm the same person that I was, but now they condemn me for being the quote that keeps coming up that people are accusing me of time and time again is that obviously Zionist and openly Jewish. And I'm like, thanks for seeing me. I feel so seen. Like, yes, but they say it as if it's something horrible.
Yeah.
Uh, and so lately, I've been describing to people who say, well, anti-Zionism isn't anti-Semitism. And I said, well, most of the time, anti-Zionism is absolutely anti-Semitism. So let's break this down. If anti-Zionism isn't always anti-Semitism, then let's look at when it is, when that's the case. If somebody believes in globalization, which is really idiotic and is never going to work out, to have a global population, a globalist ideal, which basically means the erasure of everybody's uniqueness. It means erasing people's cultural identity and nationalist connections. We should be proud to be part of communities.
That's right.
Nationalism is fine. I should be proud to be American. You should be proud to be Canadian. I can be proud to be Israeli. I should be proud to be part of the LGBT movement. You know, a nation is a group of people who have common characteristics who partner together. That's a wonderful thing. Anyway, the globalization movement is very anti-nationalist. So if somebody is a globalist and is anti-Zionist, and is also anti-German and is anti-Black Lives Matter and is anti-Palestinian, the Palestinian movements, and is anti-Japan as a state, then okay, then fine. Then anti-Zionism uh, isn't anti-Semitism. But if they're only focusing on Zionism, on being anti-Zionist, but they support all the national movements of all other types of people, that's when anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism because they're only against the national movement for the Jewish people. And that's what Zionism is. Zionism is the movement for the self-actualization of the Jewish people, ensuring that our national identity, our peoplehood, is maintained through our religion, our culture, and our indigeneity to a specific part of the world with self-governance. Zionism doesn't cancel anybody else out, isn't against anybody else's existence.
Very
It
much.
just makes sure that the Jewish people are a protected people and are self-protected.
Amen, 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 Yuval. I couldn't have put it better myself. Thank you so much for
That was a
being.
long answer.
I, I felt you had to address each kind of issue individually, so it made sense. It made sense, and I really appreciate it, and I think it's so incredible for people to know. And when we talk about Zionism, I think even within the Jewish community, people constantly tell me, "Oh, political Zionism, Theodor Herzl." I said, "Do you know how many times Zion is mentioned in the Tanakh?" Right? Do you know how
Right.
many times this word Zion is mentioned, right, in the Torah? And when I tell people, Jewish people, 145 times, they're oftentimes they're shocked to hear that. They themselves don't understand Zion, the important aspect of this. And I can guarantee you that the majority of people don't understand. This is when our organization does educational workshops and we talk in schools, in non-Jewish schools, and we'll talk about this, the teachers will always say, I didn't realize the significance of the land, right? I didn't,
We have prayers about the land every Shabbat. We have prayers
right?
about the land on every Jewish holiday. There are coins that were found that are 2,000 years old when the Romans occupied and completely conquered the Jewish nation. And there were coins that were found that on the coins said "Leman Cherut Zion," for the freedom of Zion, of Zion. Zionism has been a movement that's been part of the Jewish identity for thousands of years because we're a people who continually have been conquered, have been oppressed, have been victimized, and we fight forward for Zion. So whether it's called modern Zionism or Cherut Zion or Ahavat Zion or whatever other terms, it's all Zionism. Zionism is ingrained in Jewish history, culture, religion, and identity.
Well said. Again,
Said
thank
it. I
you
was
so
just
much.
repeating what you're saying.
No, but I could talk to you for hours, but I know you're a busy guy, and I think this is a wonderful place to cut it. But I really, really appreciate
For your
you
time.
being here with us today and for taking the time.
My pleasure. And one of the big things is when we do focus on social media is people need to engage more on social media because we are losing the social media battle. And right now, social media and media are no different. I think the statistic that I keep hearing is something around 95 to 98% of people under the age of 45 around the world receive their news and world information from TikTok and Instagram. So we need to make sure that we're more active and that we don't only talk about the algorithm, but that we are the algorithm. So all of the people who are engaged with you, Daniel, and your organization and all the work, they should follow each other. They should comment on each other's posts. You know what? Follow me across social media.
Excellent.
Help shift the algorithm, help be the algorithm of ensuring that content gets shared amongst our people, the Jews and our allies, in order to inform and amplify each other. We need to be, it's basic movement building 101. It's not about one of us, it's about all of us. And that's what we need to do with social media.
Couldn't agree with you more. Again, thank you. That's wonderful. I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Likewise, תודה רבה.